Good morning. I'm Natalie Holt, and I'm doing my presentation on Charles Dickens. Most of us know Charles Dickens as the man who invented such characters such as Oliver Twist or Barnaby Rudge, David Copperfield. But it is really his genius as a world figure that has been recognized. He had the ability to take a simple plot, a simple event, and turn it into a masterpiece. Because, after all, during his lifetime, Charles Dickens was the most famous writer in Europe and America. When he visited America to give a series of lectures, his admirers followed him. They peered in at windows at him. They were so very curious to see who this great man who could move them just by moving his pen. And all that enthusiasm and all that zeal for learning to read or learning what he would say next, Dickens became one of the only novelists in all history to read his entire works of fiction in a public setting. People were just mad about this man. They just needed more. But remarkably, Charles Dickens came from a background that was harsh and bitter and unhappy. That's why he used writing. It was something that he was good at, something that he could turn to in his moments of sadness. And it's so unbelievable because he gave readers, they gave the world, some of the most memorable characters to date. He was raised in Hampshire, England, the second of 8 children to John and Elizabeth Dickens. He was a frail child, sick most of the time, but loved to read and spend time outdoors whenever his health would allow it. What most people do not know about Dickens, however, and which I have found out only just recently, is that he suffered from severe seizures, especially when he was 12 and had to work for a living to get his father out of debtor's prison. But also something remarkable is his photographic memory. He used his memory of certain faces, certain people, certain conversations, everything that was in his head, actual events that he put into his work as an adult. Because throughout his literature, the reader will find unforgettable personalities and events, something that will stay with you, something that will take your breath away and keep you turning the pages, even though it's considered a little difficult. That Dickens shaped a profound world of characters that has stood the test of time is undeniable, even by the harshest critics. In light of the approaching holidays, who does not recall the beautiful, somewhat bittersweet story of Ebenezer Scrooge and Tiny Tim? I do. Classic. Through this book, we understand that he wrote this when he was 31 years old, at a time when he had small children, and was in high hopes because he always thought Christmas was a time for family, a time for getting together. That despite everything, a little bitty book that wasn't even a novel, just a story, published in weekly installments, could move people, just as this did. That you could take a mean old man like Ebenezer Scrooge and show him what life is really about, and how kind-hearted he could actually be. No one is more associated with Christmas Carol or any Christmas gathering than Charles Dickens, who once said that he wept and laughed and wept again in his composition of the work. It's almost a certainty that A Christmas Carol stands as his best-known work, with new adaptations almost every year. Many versions dating from the very early days of cinema, such as 1900 or 1901. There's also another remarkable book that I would like to illustrate. It's called Barnaby Rudge. It's one of his later books, written in the 1860s, not long before Dickens' death. It is one of my favorites because I don't really mind the length, but it's about Barnaby Rudge, a mentally handicapped young man who fights in the Revolutionary War because even though he's not bright, even though he isn't the smartest person around, he was kind. He thought of everyone in a good way. It doesn't matter what was wrong with you or what characteristics you possessed. He loved to see the bright sides of things. That's why he fought for his country, so that he could show the world about the beautiful things that we can all have. Dickens does not need to be summed up. He doesn't need to be categorized. He needs to be remembered. He gives you a book, something to read, an enthusiasm for knowledge. He gives you a story, wonderful and sometimes bad characters. But he gives you realism. He tells you what the world's like, and he gives you a happy ending. What I told my brother once was that even though Dickens is harsh sometimes, concerning racism or social class or poverty, I have never read a book where there was a bad ending. There's always one that always brings a tear to your eye or a smile to your face. It's remarkable to me that he can take some of the worst subjects in the world, still manage to have a great event. In conclusion, I would like to point out certain benefits that Charles Dickens gave the literary world. Many critics will argue that an artist's personality defines his art. But with Dickens, despite any flaws he may have possessed, he gave a personality to an art. I believe that if a writer can make proud those who came before and inspire those who came after, then he deserves our utmost respect. Charles Dickens, after all, was a little boy who came from nothing, but he grew up a self-taught man who left his mark on the world, and that is what we should be grateful for. Thank you.